Margaret, as you probably know, is the patron of UPA Hobart. She's a former senator in the federal government, and she's been active in politics and doing good things for many, many years. And we've always enjoyed her courses, and welcome to Margaret.
Thank you very much, David. Well, one of these days, David or Alison or one of you is going to have to keep me out because otherwise I'll just keep popping up. Because it's funny how, look, I'll just be beavering away doing something totally outside of thinking of U3A, and I'll suddenly think, oh, that'd be a good course for U3A. So you'll have to, come knocking on my door and say, enough's enough for these days. Today, yes, I do think it will be better for us to work in the down in the annex because I do want this course, like most of my courses, to be interactive, and it's much harder when some of you are way up there, although I know where you are, you want to make a quick getaway, and it's easier if we're all together. It's easier for me, but I think it's easier and more enjoyable for you. So to start off, I'll just hand round the course outline, and apologies for the Reynolds printer that has left a minimal mark down the side. But I thought you really, sometimes it helps for people to know what the subject of a particular week is, and if there's something you find missing, because this subject could go on for the whole year with many different aspects to follow it. But I've tried to outline how I think we should be considering this subject.
Margaret, I think once again you have taken an election, as you did last year in your course on Tasmanian politics. Now look what you've done, you're having a federal
I told you how sometimes I'm just doing other things and I think, wow, light bulb moment, that might work for a course. So yes, I did think dream this up for the first half of this year, or first part of this year, because yes, we know there's got to be a federal election before May the 15th, I think. And I thought it was a good opportunity to not only talk about the federal election, and obviously we will do that during the course of this course, but more to look at how the three spheres of government interact and who's in charge and who's influencing how taxpayer funds comes through for local, state and indeed federal programs. Because for many of us it's a bit of a mystery, and it certainly was a mystery to me when I first started to get involved in local politics. So first of all, I wanted to just give you an idea of the outline, and if there's anything at any stage you'd like to see added to or included in those general topic areas, just let me know, personally or by email. Okay, well today we're going to focus on how did we learn about our system of government? I mean, we're all intelligent, active citizens, and we went through school. Some of us went through university or TAFE or other forms of training, and we found ourselves, with our first vote, and gradually learning about what government, be it federal, state or local, what it could do, often what it didn't do, and how we could be involved or should be involved, depending on our point of view. So I'm going to start by asking you to just think, when were you first aware of this thing called government or democracy, or someone out there making a decision that affected you? And while you're thinking about that, yes, you've already thought, go ahead, no, go ahead.
Oh, in 1975, I was with 50 people who rode our bikes to Canberra to protest against uranium mining. And we arrived in Canberra, and I was just there because I love bike riding. But once we got to Canberra, the others, organisers like Peter Hayes, said, oh, now you go and find your local member and go and talk to your political member, your federal member of parliament. Go and talk to them and tell them why they should vote against uranium mining. I was like, oh, gee, that's an interesting idea.
Exactly. And I think many of us would have a very similar idea when we first got involved. Anyone else who's, yes?
Something interesting that I from memory was when my parents were mentioned. They used to call the Prime Minister Mr. Menzies. It was always, and the politician was always Mr. or Mr. Well, mainly I think it was always Mr. actually. But always intrigued my mother always called the Prime Minister Mr. Menzies, not like we call Hawke here.
Yeah.
Very different.
Very different. So there was probably some greater respect.
And I think you could actually talk to your politicians, federal politicians in those days. It would get past their minders now, and their minders.
And isn't it strange? Because I'm sure Albo or Hawke or anybody else over the years, if you could actually ask them, they'd probably say, oh, well, I was happy to be known as Albo or Hawke, because I thought that might make me seem a bit more approachable.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily work. Well, I certainly relate to Mr. Menzies because my great grandmother, bless her, she thought Mr. Menzies was wonderful. And even as a child, I can just remember hearing what I now recognise as respect in her tone of Mr. Menzies. And of course I also remember that my mother and my grandfather, who were both Labour supporters, this used to cause some disagreements in the household. I remember hearing about Mr. Menzies, but I don't remember knowing who or what he was and what he did and how his policies might impact on me. Anyone else? Yes.
Mine was knowing my recently widowed mother had received some support from Legacy through the government, and also when I got a Commonwealth scholarship to go to uni. I think I woke up about government then.
Yes.
I just want to say that I grew up in New Zealand, and the only politician I remember as a very young girl was Peggy Muldoon, who suggested that the stamps we put on envelopes should have a bacon flavour, because then we would know where they came from. Oh, I remember that.
Yes.
After they picked us up, myself and friends, after a Sherbet concert at the Town Hall, City Hall, I can now work out it was 1975, and he said, got a new Prime Minister, and we didn't care. We'd been to the Sherbet concert, but that's when I first
Yes.
woken up to it.
My mother, who was quite politically active when I was a very small child, and she told me how she'd been elected the president of the Cairnsey branch of the Liberal Party. This would have been in the early 50s. But her father, who owned a shop, would not let her take up the position because he thought it would be bad for business to be politically aligned. So unfortunately she wasn't able to take that position. But she was very active in writing to local members. And just to balance it up, my father was a big Labor fan, so...
Yes, it's legitimate
Yeah,
fact.
don't worry about the microphone. I think it's all right. Must have been early 70s, I guess. School trip to Canberra. I now am aware that there's a government program to encourage kids, and I think it's a fantastic idea. It's a pity they have to go to Canberra. Yeah, so that's not that I became politically active through that, but I became aware of it.
You became aware. And I guess, look, giving young people, even as young as, primary school, civics education is still, all these years later, very controversial. And teachers themselves, not all teachers, some teachers welcome the opportunity to introduce civics education, but other teachers get very nervous about it. They feel they may be seen as trying to influence children this way or that way, and that their own opinions about politics may be said to be, indoctrinating young people. And yes, I think any education system has to recognise the potential for that type of influence, one way or the other, in a number of subject areas. For instance, the one area I remember being influenced when I was a school student, particularly at high school, but even as a primary school student, was that there were limits to what girls could learn. And, I remember being praised because I beat the boy in mental arithmetic one year in the exam. And this was cause for amazement and celebration on my part. And I was celebrating as much as the teacher, because I didn't expect to beat Tommy Green. I hope no one knows him, but in Tasmania you could. But Tommy Green always topped the class in many subjects, but especially what was called mental arithmetic and numbers. He was absolutely brilliant. I don't know if he went on to be a leading economist, but he certainly had that potential. But I learnt at as young as, I suppose I'd been about 10 or 11, that it was unusual and surprising that me, a mere girl, could actually beat Tommy Green at mental arithmetic. It got worse at high school, because at high school, the male teachers of mathematics and science, they knew they were wasting their time. And I'm not that old. I didn't go to school that long ago. It shouldn't have been as bad as that, but it was quite clear. I probably was destined to follow an arts, history, languages approach in my education. That probably did suit my abilities and learning style. But it should not have been assumed. Who knows? The world might have missed out on a leading economist that could have solved all our problems. I think that's unlikely, but still, it's a good story. Coming back to our subject of how children learn about their system of government, I'm afraid by and large they don't learn specifically. Yes, there are some good examples, like your experience, and in the 70s that was fairly unusual. Did you go to school in Canberra?
No.
Certainly, I remember when we set up, and I was part of this as one of the teachers who was elected to Parliament, we set up the Canberra, or the Federal Parliamentary Education Office, quite specifically to organise and manage school education programs when children visited the Parliament. And while they may well have visited the Parliament before this, in 1984, of course, we started to plan for moving up to the big house on the hill, where there was a special room set up for teaching children about how the federal parliament worked. And of course, over the years since, state governments have followed that practice. It's worth Googling Tasmanian Parliamentary Education Office. It hasn't been going long, but it also has two very good leaders, leading women. I think both of them are former teachers, and they are responsible for organising school visits to the state parliament and encouraging and assisting teachers to actually take on civics education. But we just recently, you may have seen it, there was an article in a local paper that's a bit of a worry, given that it is about Tassie. It was quite specifically the Tassie kids, here it is, Tassie kids, bottom of the class for civics education. Tasmanian high school students have come in at the bottom of the ranking nationally for understanding about citizenship education. And I was pleased that it was high school and not primary school, because I felt very sad for the two involved in the Tasmanian Parliamentary Office, because they're doing their best. But once kids get to high school, it just falls through the cracks. Is it history? No. Is it geography? No. Is it maths? It's somewhere, it could be brought into a number of subject areas, but by and large it isn't. Yes?
It was very firmly in the national curriculum in the 2000s. Before 2010, certainly.
Yes.
Civics was a part of it, in year 8 in particular, I think, but it was anchored in there. So what's happened since?
What's happened to it? Look, a national curriculum sounds good, doesn't it? It sort of sounds as if, you know, federal and state governments and their representatives have got together and said all Australian kids should have background in these subject areas and this particular, and in particular civics education. But unfortunately, it's sitting there in a document. I think it's still sitting there in a national document. I might check. But it's these days, the national curriculum is seen primarily as a guide to teachers, because teachers are supposed to be more responsive to the classes they're teaching and the individuals they're teaching, and try to build on their interests, etc., etc. Again, it's a good idea, but it's not always put into practice in the best interests of young people's learning. So, and most teachers will tell you that the curriculum is so full of what they could and should do that they are flat out, you know, keeping up with it. So I have some sympathy for teachers, although I think they could do a little more.
Could I just say that I think the theory is difficult to comprehend when you're younger, but some schools have things like school councils and school committees and debating groups and so on, where they sort of encourage that concept of governance or, you know, making rules and so on, and it's student-centred sort of rule-making.
Yes.
And that then engenders a kind of an interest, well, it can, not for everyone, but engender an interest in it. So even if you don't fully understand the legislative council versus the Senate and all those sort of complexities,
No.
it's a system, you
But they can understand the
concepts.
basics.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
Yes, that's right. So I mean, some schools do that.
Really well, yes.
I mean, I went to school in the 60s, so maybe we did it then. Maybe it's different now, but
I don't think, I'm sure I was at school in the 50s, and I'm sure we didn't do anything like that. And rules, I mean, you're right, you could teach, you know, the whole system of Parliament and the three levels of government, you could teach it quite creatively and in an interesting way for children, younger children and then older children, by doing just that. It's about making rules. It's about deciding what is important to everyone in the community or everyone in the class, depending what level you were pitching it at, and then working from there. Because if you read certain letters to the paper or certain posts on Facebook, you just, as a former teacher, I just shake my head and think, where did I go so wrong? Because so many of the comments, it's not that I just disagree with them, and yes, I do disagree with some of them, but I'm appalled at the lack of information and lack of understanding people have of their own immediate environment. And I think that's what is a real risk to democracy. Now, a certain president in a country some distance from Australia, so I won't mention the name, but there are lots of articles today saying that that particular president is going to be responsible for the end of democracy as we know it, the end of the, quote, rules-based order, end of quote, as we know it, in the global community. And, while I'm not a member of his fan club, I assure you, I think people are worrying unnecessarily about democracy itself. I mean, yes, I would certainly worry if I was a citizen of that particular country. Yes, there are decisions being made that are very concerning for the global community, and there are some decisions being made that will indeed have some impact on how we in Australia respond to particular challenges. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that this particular moment in history should be ignored. But when you talk about democracy, I mean, there have been various forms of democracy in many societies and many cultures over many years. We wouldn't have called them, following the rule of law as we do in Australia, or that we have a Westminster democracy. Have you heard that expression? We don't. We don't have a Westminster democracy. But somehow, our leaders have managed to persuade us and the media that we have. I mean, look at it. Westminster, we don't have an elected upper house as the Westminster system does. We have a constitution, and there are differences between the Westminster system of government. And I mean, I'm not particularly critical of the Westminster system of government. I think it works for the UK, and good luck to them. But to say that we have a Westminster system of government is inaccurate on several counts. Equally, we could say we have adopted aspects of the American system of government. But again, there are differences. Yes, we have a Senate, an elected Senate, and an elected Senate that I assure you doesn't require huge sums of money to get elected to, which of course you need if you were even contemplating running for the Senate in America. So I think the important thing that we're trying to come to terms with in this course is that yes, democracy is probably the best thing we've got going for us. There are areas of our democracy that obviously we are not happy with at local, state or federal level, or indeed global level, in terms of how nations interact with each other, or not, as the case may be. But it probably is the best thing going for us. and if we certainly should aim to improve it and sustain it, but I think this, democracy, I read an article recently that democracy is dead, and it's all the fault of that person who was elected in America recently. That message to me is not a good message to get across to young people, because it's, many of them don't know much about our democracy, as that poll showed here in Tasmania, and it didn't really praise the knowledge of other Australians. So yes, Tassie didn't do so well, but other states didn't do particularly well either. So we've got to try to work with what we've got and improve what we've got. But by all means, we have to question what we've got, and that's where a lot of people don't. They just say, "Oh, the government, they're hopeless." Well, yes, you won't get any argument from me about that at the three levels of government. You know, sometimes local government, in particular parts of Tasmania, you know, you just say, what are they thinking? This is a problem, but can't they deal with it in a more reasonable and creative manner? State government, well, perhaps we shouldn't go there at the moment. On the second day of the first sitting of 2025, with you know, boats sitting out there, not able to be used, etc., ships, I should say, not boats. And federal, well, you know, if you believe the opinion polls, and opinion polls may exaggerate, they may underestimate, but certainly I think if you were to take a straw poll of your friends, in fact, do this for homework, just ask your friends, is the current federal system working? See what they think. Are they satisfied with what they've got? And you'll get a range of opinions. You might get some people who are very well informed, dare I say indoctrinated. I was talking to Rebecca White the other night, and I was sort of being a little bit, I mean, she knows me, she knows that essentially I will probably always support young women candidates, so she's probably got my vote. But she also knows that I'm pretty frustrated and dissatisfied with aspects of my former party's behaviour in recent months. And she couldn't help herself. She said, "Oh, look, I know that you're not happy with this, but you know, we have done," and she went through all the boxes. And yes, I was momentarily impressed, because I thought this person knows what she should be saying out there, to remind people that yes, a particular government has been in for 3 years and has tried to do this and this and this and this. And who am I to say, hey, but you didn't do this and this and this and this. You've got to balance what governments can do in 3 years, what they might do in future years, but you also have the right to say, hey, this isn't good enough. And I think partly because our views are very much shaped by those we work with or spend time with, our families, our friends, and the media, and social media, don't start me on that. Many people do have pretty negative views of politics, government, democracy at the moment. And I'm going to say that this is a bit harsh on a lot of good individuals who find themselves in Parliament, good individuals who get there often for the right reasons, sometimes not, but and who try their best to do what they think is right. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't criticise them. and we shouldn't expect better, because they're our representatives. We elect them. Well, we don't elect them all, do we? Some of them we haven't elected. But the community has said, yes, of all those names, I think this one is the one I most trust. And the message that I think is out there more and more is, who do you trust as an individual to do the best they can? We don't want promises, and certainly not extravagant promises that by, in 10 years' time we'll have a totally different system of whatever, and you'll pay for it, but it will be good for us. We don't want extravagant promises. We don't want cynical promises where this electorate, it could go either way, so some money is promised for that electorate. And that breaks down our trust, because if you knew, as I do, what happens to these promises, I mean, it's very easy for politicians to make a promise. I like to think I never made a promise. Mind you, I wasn't in a position, I wasn't a leader to make a promise, and I wasn't although I was a minister, but I avoided making promises because I saw what happened to them. People in good faith say, oh yes, I'll change this, I'll change that. It's much harder. You've got to get in first. You've got to persuade whichever government of the day you're part of. You've got to persuade the public service, because, people don't appreciate, unless they've been public servants, but most people don't appreciate. They blame Albo, they blame Jeremy Rockcliffe, they blame, the front people, even Erica Betts, even though he hasn't been there so long. But behind every public face are so many public servants, media, party influencers, and various other citizens who say, oh, that will never happen on my watch. I have a good example of this. When I was first elected, we had a policy called, in North Queensland, we developed this, we were always being neglected by Labor, by Liberal, by National Party. Everybody just neglected us because we were far away, a bit like Tassie, but the other end of the country. And so when I was running the campaign, I persuaded a senator from Victoria, John Button, who was responsible for helping us run our election campaign. And I said, look, we've got to have something that puts the focus on our part of Australia. Because you're down there in Victoria or Canberra or Sydney, and you're saying we need this and this and this. It doesn't apply to us up here. And that's very much the situation I often feel about Tasmania from the other end of the country. Anyway, John Button said, all right, how much will it cost? and me, in 1983, I didn't have a clue about public funding. I said, oh, look, I don't know, but it would help if the party would give us a little bit of money. I think it might have been $500 in those days. If we could have $500 to get some posters printed and some pamphlets, and if Bob Hawke, when he comes to do his election spruiking and announce what he's going to do for the North, if he would refer to our special policy. Oh yes, John, that's easy. So we got our $500 and we got some lovely posters, not promoting me or any of the local candidates, just a map of North Queensland, a special place. But then the pork barrelling does come in, I have to confess, because on the pamphlet, while the poster just reminded you, hey, vote for North Queensland, it's a special place, it needs special attention, and by the way, Bob Hawke's going to come out and say the right thing soon. But in the pamphlet, there were actual specific announcements. There was funding for a new dam, the Vertigan Dam. There were various, there was something about the freight equalisation scheme. Please don't ask me to explain all these years later. There was something for the sugar industry, etc., etc. And each of those promises reflected our region. So off I went, posters up, pamphlets out, got more copies done with money that we raised locally. And guess what? The election was held, or before the election, along came Bob and said everything we wanted him to say. And he kept repeating, North Queensland, a special place. North Queensland, a special place. Now, we won 3 of those seats. And all these years later, I have to ask myself, was that pork barrelling? Yes, some of it was, but some of it was long overdue recognition of that particular part of Australia. And I've got no problem with, a government of the day saying it's very important that we assist this part of Australia because of bushfires, or this part of Australia because of a downturn in employment opportunities, because a particular industry has gone under. Of course, governments should respond to particular needs around the nation. But when they do it, 2 months, 3 months before an election, they need to have their independent assessment of the facts that's been done in the bureaucracy or by a well-respected think tank or someone who knows the reality of what's happening. Because otherwise people are so used to pork barrelling that they will just say, more pork barrelling. Even though, in my case of North Queensland, a special place, all these years later, I think had someone said to me all those years ago, you're just part of pork barrelling, I would have been highly indignant, and I would have argued the case that we were doing something positive. However, I do think that it's been taken to extremes, and you do need all parliamentarians and elected members and the public to be able to question and say, is this justified? And sometimes it will be justified. That yes, it was a cyclone bearing down on Brisbane at the moment, and if there's terrible damage, I know Peter Dutton and Albo will be up there saying, oh, we'll do this and we'll do that. And I'd probably forgive both of them if they were responding to terrible damage that had just happened. Because we all know what would happen if they ignored it and said, sorry, our money's all spent, you've just got to wait. So you have to be a bit realistic. But when you find that programs are dreamed up to put, thousands of dollars here and here and here and here, just before an election, and there's the local members smiling and saying, I helped to get you this, you have to say, it should have been done differently. We should plan for funding that goes out to different parts of Australia for different purposes, for sporting and cultural and other activities. But either money should go out because there's very good reason for it to be targeted, or it should go out automatically on a regular basis because all communities need these facilities. And that requires governments to plan. A funny idea, that, plan. So I think that's the essence of what we'll be doing in this course. Now, I wanted to go a little bit further, on how do people react, and why do some of us get involved and some of us don't? I'm often asked to talk to groups about getting involved in local, state or federal initiatives and what they should do. And I don't think I'm all that successful. I mean, people have a nice time and we have a cup of tea or a glass of wine and I talk and they ask questions, and by and large we agree with each other. But it's very hard to get people to actually do something. Because we're all busy. I mean, many of us have retired and never been busier. And every now and then a certain Lord Mayor says to me, why can't you do something about such and such? And I say, I'm too busy. But what is it that gets people to actually say, well, no, this is important? There's a very good example that we heard of just in the last week, where all sorts of people just said, no, I'm going to show that I don't agree with this policy.
Oh, there's no stadiums there.
Stadium. Yes. So sometimes it's the issue, and it's not personal. It's, look, all this money for a stadium, and we know we need so much more in health, education, and other infrastructure. Stadium would be nice. We love a stadium. We certainly want a footy team, Tassie footy team, but can't it be another way? So sometimes an issue just erupts and people immediately identify with it. And I think they have in the south about the stadium, but interestingly they have in the north too. Why? Because they'd rather keep what you've got up there and see the Launceston, the York Park anyway, the stadium that is already there. They'd like to see that upgraded, yes, and they want to see footy still in Launceston. And even though I can understand why Hobart people want to see their matches in the south, it does make sense to me that, when you've got a small state, smaller resources than you'd like, and you've got to plan well, you do need to plan location. And Launceston or Oaklands, but let's be realistic, Launceston is a better...
Campbelltown Rams. That's what it should be. Put right in the middle.
Now there's another issue at local government level that really took off, and you'd wonder why, and you all know it. And some of you will have strong feelings, some of you will be, oh well, it's probably not a good idea, but I'm not going to get overly excited about it. The move of the university into the city.
Yes.
And look, that, I won't tell you, I'm not telling you any secrets. The council was amazed when that happened, because they didn't get it. And I think looking at it from a council point of view, not looking at it from an education point of view, I think a lot of people were looking at it from an education point of view, others were looking at it from a planning point of view, etc., etc. But purely from a council point of view, you can understand sitting in there where you've got to spend money on infrastructure and what are the current rates and all the current issues that any local government faces. Something about the university moving into the city or running classes from different buildings in the city just came out of left field. And we can all understand now where it came from, why it came, and why people felt so strongly about it. But from a council perspective, I think most of them were absolutely, whether they were for it or against it, or most of them were sort of not beastly careless, that's unfair to them. But it wasn't top of their agenda. Councillors get reports every day, practically, of problems that council is facing. And this wasn't on the list, obviously. And yet, it became a huge issue. And I can't, I mean, I can explain it as an individual, as a reasonably rational individual. I can say, well, a lot of Hobartians have been to this campus and identified with, the university in Sandy Bay. I can give those kinds of reasons, but I can't really feel the issue. Whereas I can feel some issues. I can feel the stadium issue. So I guess in getting involved in issues, you have to understand why some people are very motivated to get involved in this issue and not that, and to really work very hard to change this issue and not that one. And I suppose in my world, I wish the people, we the people, you the people, were more successful. But of course, you'd have to see my list first of the things I'd like people to change, because my list may not equate with your list, and it certainly wouldn't equate with the list out there in the general community. So, what's important to you in making a decision? And you don't have to personalise it. I'll tell you I'll tell you very quickly my story of what really got me involved in politics, and it was family. It was an inconvenient family matter. I was a young mum, just 2 children at the time, and I discovered that my local council had no interest in the barriers that young mums like me, reliant on public transport, had. And one day I was standing there with the pram, with a baby and a toddler, and the pram, the folding pram, to get on the local bus. And you know what happened? This is the late 60s. The bus driver pulled up and said, "Can't take you with all that rubbish." My children, my precious children. Perhaps he just meant the pram, but still. And off he went. And I was absolutely amazed, because it was far too far for me to walk. So, you know what I did? I went back home and didn't go out. But of course, that night, I was so enraged at what had happened that I, of course, decided to do something about it. And some of us, I don't know why some of us do something about it, and others of us say, oh, it's too hard, it's just the system. We need more of us to do something about it, because we all need that support. But I can understand why many of my friends, when I rang them up and said, "Do you know what happened to me? We've got to do something." And they said, "Oh, I don't think you can." Anyway, finally, we did do something about it. A group of women started to attend the local council meeting. And we started to ask questions. Even in those days, you could actually put in writing the question, and you had to check what sort of question. And I actually had a question that asked at council about how this could happen to me. Anyway, that was where I first started, and that led to various opportunities for me personally and for other women generally. So often it's just taking that first step that seems impossible, and the fact that it didn't change the bus driver's behaviour, of course. All I found out was that the buses were privatised, and if I wanted to complain, there was nothing the council could do about it, or the state government, or indeed the federal, if I knew about that in those days, which I didn't. But all I discovered was that the bus service was privatised, and I could ring the local manager, which I did, and I was assured that bus drivers should pick up women with 1 or 2 children and their small folding pram. So that success, I suppose, did encourage me to keep going. But there are a lot of failures along the way, and if you get too many knockbacks, it's not surprising that people say, as they often do, "Oh, I tried that once and nothing happened." So we need to encourage people to try things and make sure that at least once you get a result. Does anyone, just to finish up on, has anyone got a personal story of trying something and it didn't work, or it did work? Yes, Alison.
I named the council about our local park at Mount Nelson, which has very limited facilities compared to a lot of very nice parks around the place. And I win little bits, and there are flying foxes there, but then bits of equipment go away, and other parks are so much nicer, and it's so unfair. So I keep raving about that. I'll let your daughter up there.
And she hasn't been able to do anything.
That's right. And she brings the people who are in charge, and they say,
Yeah.
but it's been an interesting exercise, and I will keep on.
And this is another thing about people who are elected. We sort of think, oh, well, I know when I was going to be elected to the Senate, I thought, oh, I'll be able to do anything. I'll be bulletproof. It's not till you get there that you realise how difficult it is for you as one individual in a party, in my case, but even if you're not in a party. I mean, I'm sure Andrew Wilkie would probably say sometimes, oh, it might be easier if I was in a party. I mean, he wouldn't say that publicly, but he might think that occasionally, just because being on his own and trying to work with others and trying to get a political party to see reason in so many cases, there must be times that any independent is, oh, it's all too hard. That's where democracy is hard, democracy is complicated, but it's the only thing we've got to make it work. Yeah. Yes, you've got an example.
I've got a also, but I just want to make sure everybody knows about something that is very grassroots. If you see something wrong, and this might apply to you, Alison, simple little app called Snap.
Oh yes, I have that.
Soul.
Yeah.
And I've used it several times. There was a tree after me falling over across a bush track, and there was no way around without being dangerous. Just take a photo of it through this app, which is free. I get nothing, and they decide where it's going to go to. Yes, so it's probably the council, or it might be Tasmanians or something. I've got a street light put outside my house. There was nothing for a 100 kilometre. I took a photo of it at night. That's fixed that as well. That's very grassroots.
Please send it.
I made it. My husband's in Melbourne, set it up, but it's I can't remember his name. It's something my husband used to work with. It's a tech offer person, and he developed it, and it's just been very effective.
Does he send the problem to the relevant?
They direct it to the right people, yes. And I got it wrong with the light, after wind, there was a wire hanging off the said pole, also flagging around everywhere, that's only storms. But it's worked beautifully, and you get feedback, you get the opportunity to photo it up, it's great, and it's cost-free, gets to council or whoever needs to do it. Very grassroots.
Please send it to me. My email's on that sheet.
It's just called Snap Send Soul is the app.
Thank you. And look, many
That's fantastic as well. It's fantastic.
many parliamentarians and indeed public servants welcome knowing some of these things. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't want to know because it'll cost money, it's too hard. Someone else has another view on that particular issue, and they've got to balance, which is the better decision. But governments are always talking about consultation. When a policy is coming forward, the minister will usually say, well, we've done this and this and this, but we haven't consulted, but we plan to, we'd like you, the local member or senator, we'd like you to convene some meetings so that this can be explained. And governments, by and large, don't do this well. They make all sorts of decisions, and some of them are good decisions. All governments make some good decisions, but they're very bad at communicating. Now, it should be getting easier with the instant communications we've got these days, But sometimes I think it's worse because it's easy. I mean, in my day, I could do old-fashioned things like hold public meetings. I'd have an open day in my office, and everyone would come along, and I'd hand them a piece of paper. Hey, this is what we've done for North Queensland or Townsville or Rockhampton or whatever in the last 6 months. And people could ask questions, raise problems, etc., etc. That was the old-fashioned way of doing it. And I suppose I got some pretty fair credit for doing it that way, because I didn't just do it from my office. I went around Queensland doing it, you know. Hello, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you, that sort of thing, but not in so many words. And there's no doubt about it, I do get frustrated that too many elected members are not doing that sort of thing. Because I think, you know, our technology is such that you can mix and match, but nothing replaces having your elected member actually hold an occasion, and it does it with Mayor in the chair, so people can go and have a coffee with us. Unfortunately, I don't think as many parliamentarians do that as they should. Andrew Wilkie is always available. I have never had a knockout from Andrew. I've had to wait on occasions because he's here, there, everywhere. But if you want to see Andrew, and I'm not just the only one, I'm not a favourite or anything, I'm not even in his electorate, but he has a reputation that you can always find, he will always eventually find a time. Now, just before an election, he's probably already booked up in many ways. But other people, they just won't see it, especially senators. They just sort of think, what do you want? I won't tell you the senator that I tried to see, because you'd say I was being partisan. But her office may, I've told you that much, but a few of them. Her office said, what do you want? And I said, oh, well, I'm a local constituent, and I just wanted to welcome her to the position and tell her a little bit about it. There was a special event coming up in where I live. I'm trying not to butt in. Anyway, it took me about 4 months to organise an appointment with that particular senator. And my request was about a public community event. It wasn't to complain that this wasn't happening or that wasn't happening, or I needed, millions of dollars spent on that strip of road. It was about involving her in a community event. I finally got my appointment, and you'll say perhaps it was because it was me, but I got my appointment. There were not one, not two, there were 3 young men with their notebooks who sat in on that meeting and wrote down everything I said. Now, to me, that's not consultation, that's not building up a relationship with your local community. I mean, if you're having a meeting with a big industry lobby group that's trying to get you to make a commitment that you're really not in a position, yes, you should have someone there as a witness, and they might take a few notes. Or if it's a group that's got a lot of detail to present, you might need 1 person, but 3. Anyway, thank you very much. We'll see you downstairs, down in the annex next week. And don't forget your homework. What do people think of federal government generally? This one, past ones, future ones. What do they think? And they'll either never talk to you again, or they'll tell you what they think.